Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. A dream can be a very powerful experience, however is not paranormal by definition. It's when that dream intersects significantly with our waking reality that we sit up and wonder, how far is the reach of its playing out? Can a dream really mark an alternate lived reality that we slip in and out of? Two Weird World viewers have sent different accounts of dreams interacting with their waking life. A second life. Kimmy is a 48-year-old American woman living in Florida in the US. She has written to us with the stunning account of her dreams being composed of another life that she shares with the dead. When she goes to sleep there, she enters this earthly reality, her life as it is now. When she wakes up there, her life here is like a dream, and when she wakes up here, that life is like a dream. Strangely, it always seems to be raining or wet in some way in the other reality, but always continues on like time does in this reality. By way of background, Kimmy explains that she has always had very realistic and vivid dreams. When she was 9 years old, for about a week, she had recurring dreams that she couldn't wake up from, scaring her mother. These dreams were about her own death in a past life. After that, Kimmy says she would go to sleep and often fly to her grandparents' house to spend time with her paternal grandma, who died when she was 4, and her grandpa, who passed away when she was 14. She had an unconventional but loving childhood, mainly raised by a single mum, Dia, who was Wiccan and very open-minded about things we don't understand. Family prayers consisted of tarot cards and tea readings. Kimmy, her sister and brother would play card games, strengthening their psychic abilities, that she believes everyone has but doesn't exercise, by guessing black or red, diamonds or spades. They did psychic exercises like trying to move paper or bend spoons with their minds. They also often practiced astral projection, which was how Kimmy flew to Grandma's in her dreams. Kimmy's mother passed away abruptly from heart failure 13 years ago. Although she had not been sick, they had talked often about death. She told Kimmy that when she dies, she will wait for her and try in any way she can to communicate with her, that she wouldn't move on if she could help it until Kimmy also did. This promise she made Kimmy as a child, and Kimmy says she always kept her promises, and this was no exception. In the beginning, the contact was sparse and didn't happen often, although Kimmy was awestruck when it did. Her mum was there. Kimmy smelled her, hugged her, and they spoke. Kimmy says that she tasted the tear that rolled down her mother's cheek when she held her and apologised for not saying goodbye. 6 years ago, Kimmy's fiancé passed away, then her father 6 weeks later. Since then, Kimmy says her other life happens almost every night. It occurs mostly when she oversleeps, after her REM or rapid eye movement sleep and regular dreams are over. In Kimmy's second life, she and her mum live together. She describes her mum in this alternate life as about 30-ish and beautiful, as are Kimmy and everyone else present. In that life, they have moved around 5 times in 13 years. They have just sold their houseboat because they couldn't stop the leaks, then lived in a hotel for about 5 weeks until they got their current house. This house leaks too, and she remarks that it always rains and floods wherever they live. Mundane, everyday events occur in this second life, but the only people who were there have already passed. Kimmy says that the previous night she had just come across her cat, Junior, who passed away 5 years ago. They had her dad over for dinner a while ago. Her grandfather dropped by and they went to the fair. At their previous house, they had a neighbour, Jeff, whom she hadn't seen or heard from since 3rd grade. Like everyone else there, he was around 30 and in his prime. Kimmy had known him when he was only 8 years old, yet she still knew it was him. Kimmy says that she has searched the internet to see if anyone else has had a similar experience and has found nothing like her own. She wonders if others just don't talk about it. By now coming out publicly with her own lived experience, perhaps she can find out whether she is alone or not, and maybe even compare her stories with others. At another level, she feels that it would be interesting to do a sleep study to find out what's going on inside her while this very real alternate life happens. She wonders if her mind has constructed this reality as a coping mechanism, or if her background and traumas have opened up this very real other reality. Kim would appreciate other viewers' feedback, so feel free to write your response or about your own experience below. The rounded hat. In the early 1990s, Darren and his girlfriend were living in a top-floor flat in Cowbridge Road East in Cardiff, while he studied for a degree at Cardiff University. One night, he had such a vivid dream he can still remember it, and the morning after, he had to talk about it for a couple of hours, as he could not work out what had happened. The dream had felt so disturbingly real. In the dream, he was dressed in a very heavy coarse wool coat over what seemed like a dark red wool military jacket, thick dark breeches, long very worn boots, and a shabby rounded top hat. He was very tired, but walked alongside a coach as it went down a very wet lane covered in soggy animal dung. It was leading into Cardiff, and Darren felt like he knew the way. He was feeling annoyed at the situation as he wanted to look his best on arrival at his destination, but as he had apparently walked for weeks, he simply looked forward to finding a place to eat and sleep that night. He carried only a thin cloth bag under his coat which held some hard cheese and a small flask of spirits. The coach stopped and the driver pointed out the direction for him to take and then left him there. Darren walked on in heavy rain, feeling he knew the road well, but had not been down it for many years. He experienced anger when he passed a new stone-built house by a chapel, and in one lane of new brick warehouses, he saw that the inn at the end of the lane was now deserted and dilapidated. Now despairing, he ended up sleeping on a pile of sacks and bales inside one of the warehouses, after paying the owner with copper coins he did not recognise from a small smooth leather pouch in his coat. After a night in the drafty, musty warehouse, he decided to head for the long new stone-built house he had seen the evening before. As he approached, a man in his 60s, trim and well-dressed, all in black, descended the front steps. He had a harsh and spiteful look on his face and, glancing at Darren, seemed to stop abruptly as he recognised him. He stared and then quickly retreated, slamming the door behind him. Darren then started to loudly shout, demanding what was his, and apparently shouting so loudly that he woke his girlfriend who was in bed next to him. She was very shocked by his noisy rantings about money and land, particularly as normally Darren is a sound sleeper. There followed an extended altercation with the older white-haired man in black, who shouted at Darren from an open window and finally walked back down the steps, producing a long pistol. Threatening Darren that if he didn't go, his days were over, he then fired, causing Darren to trip and fall over a wooden wheelbarrow, of which, incidentally, the shape and design he had never seen before. The man yelled in Darren's face that he owed him nothing, that he had always been trouble, and that his mother had been trouble too. Darren then realised he wore a clergyman's type collar before he felt himself expire from a second shot. He woke up drenched in sweat what seemed like seconds later, but in his own bed in the 1990s and not on a muddy lane in what seemed like the early 19th century. Darren was so shocked by the vivid and emotional dream, so real in its every detail, that he was too shaken even to make himself a coffee for a couple of hours. The dream's graphic lucidity was not even like a film, as everywhere had smells and textures, and the air even smelled fresher. Despite laughing at his loud shouting, his girlfriend, knowing him to be truthful, was stunned when he finished his detailed description. She suggested they look at some old brick warehouses at the back of their flats, which seemed very much like those in Darren's dream, but turned out to have no doorway and an air of dereliction. The lane was also now pitted old tarmac and not a muddy track covered in damp horse dung, which it had been in his dream. The kicker came when, a few months later, a friend came to stay with them for a weekend and slept on a camp bed in their living room. The second morning at breakfast, they asked if she had slept well, but she shook her head and said no, and then asked if they knew they had a ghost. Darren and his girlfriend were both stunned, as they had never felt or seen anything and were happy in the flat. She went on to tell them that at around 3 a.m, she had been woken up by something in the room, and in the dim light from the streetlights outside, she saw the broad shape of a man wearing a shabby, rounded top hat. She said the room felt freezing, and she just slunk under the bedding and hoped it would go away. When she peeked again, the presence had gone, but the room still felt icy cold. The friend had lain there for the rest of the night, unable to go back to sleep, but the sighting shook her up so much that she went and stayed the last night in a local B&B. Eventually, Darren linked the ghost with the rounded top hat to his dream a few months before.